Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am going to discuss the most important topic in psychiatry, both from clinical point of view as well as your exams. That is schizophrenia, one of the psychotic disorder that we commonly encounter in our day-to-day life and psychiatry practice. So, before coming to the disorder, just a brief introduction about schizophrenia. When we see the literal meaning of this word, it is derived from two words. One is schizo, that means splitting, and the other term is phrenia, that is mind. So the literal meaning is splitting of mind, which is very different from what we know as split personality disorder. That is a different entity. Here, splitting of mind means there is dissociation, lack of association between the thoughts, behavior and emotions of a person or a mind. So basically it is a syndrome, that is, it is characterized by a group of symptoms. Mainly there will be disturbance in thinking, emotion, perception, cognition and behavior. So it is not a single entity, rather you will encounter patients with heterogeneous clinical presentation. Course will vary from person to person, and similarly the treatment outcome also differs from person to person. Now, how we diagnose this? Basically the diagnosis is based on psychiatric history, and the gold standard for diagnosis is mental status examination. Coming to the history of schizophrenia, earlier a term was used for this entity, that was dementia precox. That means early onset dementia. There was, according to Kraepelin, it was characterized by dementia, but as we see with dementia generally, that it has a late onset. Usually it is a disease of the elderly, whereas there was cognitive disturbance in schizophrenia, but that was relatively earlier in onset. So according to Kraepelin, it was known as early onset dementia or dementia precox. Now Eugene Bleuler, he was the first person who coined this disorder as schizophrenia, where he noticed that there was splitting of the psyche. Now then came Bleuler. According to Bleuler, he characterized the symptoms of schizophrenia into two groups. One were the fundamental symptoms and other were the accessory symptoms. Nowadays, we diagnose schizophrenia on the basis of delusions, hallucinations and grossly abnormal behavior. According to Bleuler, these were the secondary symptoms. For him, there were 4 A's, which he labeled as the main symptoms or the fundamental symptoms of schizophrenia. So these are the 4 A's as per Bleuler. First is loosening of association. How it manifests? It manifests as incoherent speech. So there is no association or loosening of association between the successive thoughts of the patient, that manifest as incoherent speech or difficult to understand speech. What it means that if you will notice their speech, they will make sentence, but that sentence has no sense. So that is the disturbance of association. Other thing which he noticed was there was flattening of affect, or there was lack of emotional reactivity. So that is known as affective disturbance. The third thing is schizophrenics were withdrawn from reality into an inner fantasy, which he called as autism. And the fourth A was ambivalence, which means two contradictory thoughts preoccupy the mind of the patient. For example, whether to do or not to do a particular thing, that is known as ambivalence. So the patient will be confused between do or not to do. So these were the main symptoms of schizophrenia according to Eugene Bleuler. Then came Schneider. He noticed the patients and he categorized their symptoms into first rank and second rank symptoms. So according to Schneider, first rank symptoms, one is audible thoughts, in which the person hears his or her own thoughts, which is also known as thought echo phenomena. Other thing which he categorized as first rank symptom were auditory hallucinations, which were of two types. Either they were conversing type or commenting type. Then somatic passivity experiences, in which the person experiences certain somatic sensations which he contribute to some external experience. Then thought withdrawal and other thought alienation phenomena, where the person feels that his or her thoughts are escaping from his mind, and they are accessible to other people, and these thoughts are being broadcasted through television or radio. Nowadays, this thought alienation phenomena is included in delusion of control. What we know as delusion of control today was earlier known as thought alienation phenomena as per Schneider. Now, other delusion perceptions. What happens in delusion perceptions? The person attributes a special meaning to the normal percept. For example, if a knife is kept and that is a butter knife, the purpose of that knife is to apply butter. But whenever someone starts to develop schizophrenia, he or she start to perceive that this knife is kept to harm him or her. So he or she attributes a special meaning to the normal percept, that is delusional perception. And other experiences like made affect and made impulses, where the people feel that their actions, their emotions, they are under the control of some external agency. These were the first rank symptoms. Now in schizophrenia, other disorders of perception or sudden delusional ideas, then confusion state, then depressive and euphoric mood changes, and lack of feeling of emotional impoverishment, they were considered as second rank symptoms as per Schneider. So now coming to the etiopathological factors, schizophrenia has exact cause is still not known, but there are certain hypotheses that are associated with developing schizophrenia. There is a role of genetics, certain environmental factors, neurobiological, social and psychological factors. They are associated with schizophrenia. So coming to these factors one by one, the first is genetic basis of schizophrenia. Evidence from family studies, twin studies and adoption studies show a higher incidence of schizophrenia in those who have one or other family member suffering from this disorder. That clearly suggests that there is biology. Then, according to biochemical theory of schizophrenia, there is disturbance in certain neurotransmitters. The most important of that is dopamine. Then another models like contributory effect of some viruses in its etiology. These all are also contributing to its etiology. Then the latest theories of schizophrenia etiology are neurodevelopmental theory, in which there is certain disturbance in the brain structure of patients with schizophrenia, and there is altered synaptic circuitry and aberrant neuronal connectivity. These all contribute to schizophrenia. So multiple factors will play a role in its etiology. First, the genetic evidence can be seen from this study. According to his study, he noticed that if both parents have schizophrenia, the chances of having the person has 46% risk of developing schizophrenia. If only one parent, the risk was 16%. And so according to him, he noticed that if sibling has schizophrenia, the risk was 8%. According to this study, we can notice that higher the genetic load, more will be the chance of developing schizophrenia. Adoption studies also showed that biological offsprings had higher rate of schizophrenia than the adopted ones. So linkage and genetic studies have shown the evidence of 9 linkage sites in schizophrenia. These are the linkage sites of these chromosomes which have shown genetic transmission. Now coming to the neurotransmitter hypothesis, the most important neurotransmitter is dopamine. So as we know that there are certain positive symptoms in schizophrenia and there are certain negative and cognitive symptoms. Later on I will tell you what are these positive and negative symptoms, but there are different pathways involved in different symptoms. First you see in this diagram that mesolimbic pathway, overactivity of this pathway, mesolimbic pathway, is associated with positive symptoms. This pathway projects from midbrain to nucleus accumbens, and then the other pathway which projects from ventral tegmental area of the midbrain to the cortex, that is mesocortical pathway. The neurotransmitter disturbance in this pathway is related with negative and cognitive symptoms. We can also tell that there is NMDA receptor hypofunctioning. The evidence comes from the study that you all know the anesthetic agent ketamine and PCP. If we give it to the normal population, they have a tendency to produce psychotic symptoms, and they also exacerbate the psychotic symptoms in schizophrenia patients. So this contributes to our knowledge that there is some abnormality in glutamate pathway in schizophrenia. So ultimately the glutamate is known as the master switch of the brain. It regulates through direct projections the neurotransmitter dopamine, and when glutamate leads to increased dopamine release in the striatum, it leads to positive symptom of schizophrenia. Whereas when dopamine is decreased in there is decreased in dopamine in prefrontal cortex or the mesocortical pathway, it results in negative symptoms of schizophrenia. So the dopamine imbalance is contributing to these symptoms, positive or negative. Pathways are different, but the master switch or the main neurotransmitter which is ultimately regulating this dopaminergic release is glutamate. So there is role of glutamate also in its etiology. Now coming to the second neurotransmitter, that is serotonin. There is hypothesis which says that serotonergic excess is also a cause of both positive and negative symptoms in schizophrenia. The second generation antipsychotics which we are using, they decrease the positive symptoms. They are also acting on serotonin receptors. So another model is the stress diathesis model, which says that person who has biological vulnerability to develop schizophrenia, whenever there is stress, the psychotic symptoms are triggered by that stress. So the stressor may be genetic, biological, psychosocial or environment. So there is a role of genetics, environmental factors, stress. Each and everything will ultimately contribute and lead to the manifestation of psychotic symptoms. Now the viral hypothesis, the data also shows a higher incidence of schizophrenia when there is prenatal exposure to influenza during the epidemic. So studies show that the frequency of schizophrenia is increased after exposure to influenza, which is common during winter seasons. So there is a role of influenza virus also in its etiology. Coming to the brain structure, the loss of brain volume is widely reported in schizophrenia, which is due to the reduced axonal density, and CT scan also shows that there is lateral and third ventricular enlargement and reduction in cortical volume in schizophrenics. There is also reduced symmetry in several brain areas in schizophrenia, and this occurs during fetal life, and which is due to the disruption in brain lateralization during neurodevelopmental. This is the latest or the neurodevelopmental hypothesis of schizophrenia. So if you see in total that the person was genetically predisposed, then different environmental, social and psychological factors associated with neurodevelopmental abnormalities will result in brain dysfunction and chemical imbalance that ultimately results in the disease. Coming to the epidemiology, the general prevalence of schizophrenia is 1%. Now coming to the age of onset, the age is usually late adolescent and early adulthood. The peak age of onset is 10 to 25 years for males, and for females it is comparatively later, that is 25 to 35 years. But in females we also notice a bimodal distribution. After 45 years there is an increased chance of developing schizophrenia. Now how to diagnose it? As we have two methods of diagnosing psychiatric disorder. One is International Classification of Disease according to ICD, and the other is according to DSM-5. So I will be discussing about the DSM-5 diagnosis today. Then diagnosis is made on the basis of diagnostic criteria. So the first step is to take a history, detailed history. This should also be done to exclude other problems or the other physical illnesses that might be contributing to psychiatric symptoms. Then blood test and imaging is done to monitor the general health and to rule out other conditions that might be contributing for the symptoms. Then in some cases where there is diagnostic doubt or there is a possibility of association of some medical illness, MRI or CT may be needed. Now coming to the diagnostic criteria, as per DSM-5, 2 or more of these 5 symptoms should be present for a period of time. These are the active phase symptom, and total duration for diagnosis should be 6 months for schizophrenia, and at least one of these symptoms should be from the first 3, that is delusion, hallucination and disorganized speech. Other 2 symptoms are disorganized behavior or catatonic behavior and negative symptoms. One by one I will explain what are these different symptoms. First is delusions or hallucinations and disorganized speech, which is also known as positive symptoms of schizophrenia. Positive symptoms means that symptoms are present which are not normal to be present in a particular person. First is delusion, which is a false firm belief that is not shared by other person of the same cultural background. The second is hallucination, which is a disturbance in perception. It may be called as perception without stimulus. The third thing is incoherent speech or the disorganized speech. Then coming to the negative symptoms. Negative symptom refers to certain symptoms which should be present actually in that person, but in schizophrenics they are lacking. For example, there is poverty of speech, which is known as alogia. Then there is lack of emotional and facial expression, which is known as affective flattening. Then there is difficulty to begin and sustain activities, that is avolition. Then decreased ability to find pleasure, that is anhedonia, and withdrawal from sociality or asociality. So they are remembered usually by A's: alogia, affective flattening, avolition, anhedonia and asociality. Then there are also disturbance in memory and attention in schizophrenics. These are known as cognitive disturbances. Coming to the type of schizophrenia, The most common type that you will encounter is paranoid schizophrenia. It is characterized by prominent delusions and hallucinations, may develop at later age. Now here speech and emotions may be unaffected. That is, you may not find such flattening of affect or incoherent speech in these patients. They are at risk of violent behavior and suicide under the influence of these delusions and hallucinations. Second type is disorganized or hebephrenic. It is usually characterized by early onset. Then the behavior is disorganized. There is purposeless wandering, then pranks, giggling, grimacing. Such type of behavior are common in these patients, and if delusions and hallucinations are present, then they are fleeting. It is also associated with poor prognosis. So the type of schizophrenia predicts the prognosis. Paranoid schizophrenia generally has a good outcome, whereas hebephrenic schizophrenia has poor outcome. Now other type is catatonic schizophrenia, which is rare. Because of the catatonic symptoms, there is risk of malnutrition and self-injury and exhaustion, and there is unusual moments. Often there is switching between extremes of overactivity and underactivity. It is characterized by mutism, stupor. Then other form is undifferentiated, when the characteristics do not fix into one particular category, then we label as undifferentiated. The other type is residual schizophrenia, where there was a past history of psychosis, but at present the patient only manifests negative symptoms. So these are the 5 common types of schizophrenia. Coming to the management, now patient may be managed as outpatient basis or hospitalization. Whether hospitalization is necessary or not, that depends on different factors, like if there is history of self-harm, patient is at risk to harm self, or due to violence patient is a threat to others, then you need to hospitalize. Also, if there is lack of proper nutrition, then also you may need to hospitalize. So for management, we have the drugs which are commonly known as neuroleptics or antipsychotics. Among the antipsychotics, earlier we were using the classical or the first generation antipsychotics, some of them like haloperidol, flupentixol, triflupromazine, chlorpromazine. But nowadays, our first choice is from the second generation antipsychotics. This is the list of second generation antipsychotics. Why we need to use these drugs but not first generation? The reason is the first generation antipsychotics were associated with extrapyramidal side effects, which are less in second generation antipsychotics, but they have a tendency to raise blood glucose levels or triglyceride levels. So these are associated with metabolic side effects, but extrapyramidal side effects are comparatively less as compared to the first generation. So these are the first choice in patients with schizophrenia. Now for those who do not respond to drugs, we have electroconvulsion therapy for these cases. ECT may also be useful for catatonic stupor and uncontrolled catatonic excitement in schizophrenics, where there is lack of control with drugs or the patient is at risk of suicide or homicide. So this is the flow chart where we start with a first generation, second generation antipsychotics. If the patient does not respond or there is partial response, we may switch to some other antipsychotics. But if there is failure to respond to 2 antipsychotics at their appropriate dose and at appropriate duration, then our choice will be a drug which is reserved for resistant schizophrenia, that is clozapine. Coming to the prognosis, It is a treatable disorder but not curable. Fortunately, we have effective treatments that reduce the symptoms, decrease the likelihood of relapse, and will shorten the duration of psychotic episodes. And majority of the people can live a productive and satisfying lives with proper medications and counseling. The ability of schizophrenics to live and function well in society is excellent. So the remission rate is 10 to 60%. 20 to 30% of schizophrenics are able to lead somewhat normal life. 20 to 30% will experience moderate symptoms, which commonly include the negative symptoms, and 40 to 60% of the patients remain significantly impaired by their disorder for the entire lives. In the earlier slides also I told you that the prognosis varies from patient to patient. So they do, if we compare with mood disorder, they do much poorer. Although 20 to 25% of mood disorder patients are also severely disturbed at long-term follow-up. But if we will compare the two disorder, then the prognosis of schizophrenics is relatively poorer as compared to those with mood disorders. So there are certain factors that will determine whether the patient will have a good prognosis or a poor prognosis. Some among them are mentioned here. So if the onset is late onset, then the prognosis will be good. Earlier the onset, poor will be the prognosis. The second thing is, if there is some stressor present as a precipitating factor, the outcome will be good. If onset is acute, outcome will be good, whereas insidious onset will be associated with poor prognosis. Good pre-morbid social, sexual and work histories are associated with good prognosis. Then family history of mood disorder and presence of mood disorder symptoms is associated with good outcome, whereas if there is family history of schizophrenia, that is associated with poor outcome. So there is a difference. Family history of mood disorder is associated with good prognosis, and family history of schizophrenia is associated with poor prognosis. Then if patient has good family support, then presence of positive symptoms, these all will contribute to good prognosis. Whereas the negative symptoms, presence of neurological symptoms, history of perinatal trauma, no remission in the last 3 years, many relapse, and history of assaultiveness, these all are associated with poor prognosis. So that was all for schizophrenia. Thank you.